The sea was never silent at Greywick Point. Waves hammered the black cliffs with the same rhythm that had carried through generations, as if the ocean itself remembered every name it had claimed. For Thomas Hale, the sound was both lullaby and warning. He stood on the rocky path, staring up at the lighthouse, its white tower cut into the mist, the lantern's glow sweeping across the restless dark. Once, his father had kept that light burning. Now, the job belonged to Samuel Price, a man Thomas barely knew yet instinctively distrusted. The villagers said Greywick Point demanded bloodlines. The lantern always passed from father to son, keeper to child. But when Elias Hale drowned 3 years ago, the chain had broken. Thomas had been too young, too uncertain, and Samuel had stepped in. Still, whispers followed Thomas everywhere. The sea does not forget its chosen. That night, restless dreams dragged him under. He dreamed of waves that rose higher than houses, of cold hands pulling at his legs, of a light cutting through the storm. In the glass of the lantern, he saw a face, his father's. Elias's lips moved, shaping words Thomas could not hear. But his eyes begged. Thomas woke with salt on his lips and the echo of a single plea in his mind. Free me. Morning brought little comfort. He carried the dream with him as he walked to Greywick Point. The air smelled of seaweed and rust, gulls circling in the distance like scraps of torn paper. The iron gate creaked as he pushed it open. Samuel Price was at the base of the tower, coiling a rope. His back was straight despite his years, his hands calloused from decades of storms. He looked up with mild annoyance when Thomas approached. "You're early," Samuel muttered. "I couldn't sleep." Thomas hesitated, then blurted, "Why does the sea mark families? Why not choose someone else?" The keeper's eyes narrowed. "Because the sea knows blood. It remembers, and it never lets go." Thomas's throat tightened. "And my father? Why didn't he pass on?" Samuel looked away, jaw clenching. "Some souls rest, some don't. Best you don't ask why." But Thomas heard what the old man didn't say. His father hadn't been allowed rest at all. That night, Thomas returned to the lighthouse, unable to resist. He crept up the spiral stairs, heart hammering. The lantern chamber glowed like a captured star. Dust motes spun in the air as the great lens turned, throwing beams across the endless water. He pressed a hand to the glass. The glow deepened. Shapes stirred within the light. And then, as clear as if he stood before him, Elias appeared. His face was gaunt, his eyes hollow, but his presence undeniable. "Father," Thomas whispered. The lips moved. For an instant, Thomas thought he heard the faintest echo. "Thomas, don't follow." Before he could speak again, the light warped. A second face pushed forward, pale and smiling, with hair that floated like weeds in dark water. Her eyes were bottomless. Her voice seeped into his head. "Child of the keeper, come closer." Thomas froze, cold crawling through his bones. "Who are you?" "The sea's will, the heart of the lantern. I can give him back to you." Elias's face strained against hers, mouthing no. The pale woman's smile widened. "A soul for a soul, yours for his. On the longest night, the sea will claim its balance." The beam flared, blinding him. When the light dimmed, only the golden glow remained. Thomas staggered back, heart thundering. He had been marked, and Greywick Point would never let him go. The days after that night blurred into unease. Thomas moved through the village with the constant weight of the lantern's secret pressing on him. The market's chatter, the gulls overhead, even the laughter of children by the shore seemed muted, as though the whole world knew what he had seen. He couldn't shake his father's face from his mind. The way Elias pressed against the glow, trapped yet alive in some twisted reflection of the sea. Nor could he forget the pale woman with the endless eyes, her words dripping like seawater in his ears. A soul for a soul. But no one else could know. He tried once, starting to tell his mother while she kneaded bread in their small kitchen. But when he mentioned the lantern, her hands froze, flour dusting her lashes as she looked at him with sharp fear. "Don't ever say that again, Thomas," she whispered. "There are things we don't speak of, things that keep us safe." Safe. But his father hadn't been safe. On the third night, Thomas returned to the tower. He told himself it was only to be sure he hadn't dreamed it, that his mind wasn't unraveling. The spiral stairs creaked under his steps, the draft smelling of brine and oil. The lantern chamber pulsed softly, as though alive. Thomas stood in the glow, waiting. The glass rippled. First, the pale woman appeared. Her smile was faint this time, her voice a whisper threaded with hunger. "You came back." "I want answers," Thomas said, forcing his voice steady. "Why my father? Why this lighthouse?" She tilted her head, hair drifting as though underwater. "Every shore has its bargains. This one demands guardians. The keeper holds the souls the sea cannot claim. My father's soul. Yes, his and countless others. Without the lantern, the drowned would rise, and the village would drown with them." Thomas's stomach turned. Then why keep him? He was a good man. He served his duty. Her smile sharpened. The sea never returns what it takes, unless another is offered. The light flickered, and Elias's face surfaced, pain etched into every line. He mouthed one word again, "No." Thomas reached for the glass, but the chamber shook. The voice swelled in his skull. "Choose, child of Hail. The night is coming, and with it the sea's hunger." The beam burst, forcing him back down the stairs. At dawn, Samuel Price found him sleeping against the wall of the lighthouse base, salt streaks drying on his cheeks. The old keeper didn't scold. Instead, he handed Thomas a mug of tea and sat beside him. "You've seen her," Samuel said quietly. Thomas froze. "You know?" The keeper's eyes were tired. "Aye. She comes to all of us sooner or later. Some resist. Some don't." "Why didn't you warn me?" Thomas snapped. "Would you have listened?" Samuel asked. "The lantern doesn't reveal itself until it chooses. It wanted you to see." Thomas's voice cracked. "My father's in there." Samuel's jaw tightened. "Yes. Why didn't you tell me?" The old man's hands shook as he sipped his tea. "Because there's nothing you can do that won't cost you everything. The lantern holds them because it must. If you bargain, the sea wins. If you refuse, the souls remain bound." "So he's trapped forever?" Samuel didn't answer. His silence was answer enough. That evening, the village gathered at the docks for the Autumn Tide Festival. Lanterns swayed on ropes, children carried shells painted gold, and music spilled into the air. Thomas stood apart, his eyes drawn to the horizon where the waves glittered under moonlight. Old Mrs. Dunlow, bent and sharp-eyed, shuffled beside him. "The sea's watching you," she said without greeting. He started. "What do you mean?" She tapped her cane against the planks. "Your blood remembers. The sea won't let the hail line go. Beware the bargain, boy. It's never worth the price." Before he could ask more, she was swallowed into the crowd. The drums beat faster, the villagers dancing. Yet Thomas felt none of it. His gaze remained fixed on the dark water, and the whisper he alone could hear within it. A soul for a soul. That night, the dream returned. The sea rose higher, swallowing the docks. His father stood on the waves, hand outstretched, but behind him, the pale woman loomed, her fingers weaving into his shadow. Thomas lunged forward. "I'll save you." Elias shook his head, mouthing no. "Don't." The woman's voice wrapped around him. "The night of longest shadow. The lantern will open. Choose then, Thomas Hale." He woke with the taste of salt choking his throat. The choice had been set, and the sea would not wait forever. The days crept toward winter, each sunset sinking faster, the nights thick with wind and rain. Thomas felt the weight of every passing hour. The woman's warning echoed like a tide against his skull. the night of longest shadow. He watched his mother more closely now. Her eyes carried a quiet sorrow he hadn't noticed before, as if she too bore the knowledge but refused to name it. When she prayed before bed, her lips moved not only for protection from storms but also in whispers that carried the word forgive. Thomas couldn't forgive. Not yet. At the lighthouse, Samuel kept to routine, polishing the lens, trimming the wicks, watching the sea with a hollow gaze. Thomas helped, though his mind was elsewhere, on the glass and the shapes moving inside it. Each night the faces came clearer. Fishermen swallowed by storms, children lost in waves, and Elias. Always Elias. His hand pressed against the glow, as though reaching for his son. One evening, Thomas found himself muttering aloud to the lantern, "I'll find a way." The glass trembled. For the first time, his father's voice carried through, faint but real. "Don't." Thomas staggered back. "Father." The beam flared, drowning out the sound. The village, unaware of the storm brewing in Thomas's heart, prepared for the midwinter vigil. Every year, on the longest night, they lit fires on the cliff to honor those lost to the sea. The vigil was old tradition, born long before Thomas's time, but he now saw it differently. Less celebration, more bargaining. Mrs. Dunlow caught him carrying wood to the cliff path. Her sharp eyes pinned him. "You feel it, don't you? The pull." He swallowed. "What do you know?" "The sea doesn't want your father," she said. "It wants you, always has. That's the curse of the Hale bloodline." Thomas's chest tightened. "Why?" She leaned closer, voice low. "Because your great-grandfather made the first bargain. To save the village, he offered himself. But the lantern tricked him. It didn't just take him. It bound his descendants, one by one." Thomas froze. "Then I'm next." Her cane tapped against the frozen earth. "Unless you're clever enough to break the cycle." "How?" he demanded. But she only shuffled away, muttering, "Not all debts are paid in blood. Some are paid in truth." That night, Thomas dreamed again. This time, he stood inside the lantern itself. Souls pressed against him, their faces pale and desperate. His father reached for him, but the woman appeared behind Elias, her hair swirling like black water. "Choose, Thomas. Your life or another's. The sea will not be denied." Thomas screamed, "There must be another way." Her laugh echoed, hollow and cruel. "Find it before the shadow falls, or you'll join them." He woke drenched in sweat, the storm outside rattling the shutters. The day of the vigil arrived. The village lit bonfires on the cliffs, their glow flickering against the sea. The priest spoke of remembrance, of duty, of gratitude to the keepers who watched the shore. But Thomas heard only the roar of the waves, as if the ocean itself mocked their prayers. When the crowd dispersed, he stayed behind, staring at the black horizon. The longest night had begun. Samuel joined him, cloak whipping in the wind. "She'll come tonight." Thomas's throat tightened. "Then tell me how to stop her." The old keeper shook his head. "I tried, lad. Every keeper has. There's no stopping what was set in motion generations ago." "I won't accept that." Samuel's gaze softened, almost pitying. "Then you'll break as I did, as your father did." Thomas clenched his fists. "No, I'll find the truth," Mrs. Dunlow said, but Samuel grabbed his shoulder, voice harsh. "Stay away from her. That woman's family was the first to drown. She's half mad with grief." Thomas pulled free. Maybe madness sees clearer than resignation. That midnight, he climbed to the lantern chamber. The storm had grown violent, waves hammering the rocks, spray lashing the glass. The light swirled brighter than he'd ever seen. And there she was. The pale woman filled the chamber, her form towering, her hair like seaweed whipping in currents unseen. Faces drifted in her gown. Men, women, children. All silent, all watching. "The time has come, Thomas Hale." The glass melted into a mirror of the sea. His father pressed against it again, eyes full of pain and love. "Choose," she whispered. "Give the sea a soul and your father walks free. Refuse, and he is lost forever." Thomas's breath shuddered. "Whose soul?" Her smile gleamed like moonlight on water. "Anyone's. Yours. Another's. The sea is patient only until dawn." The lantern pulsed, waiting, and Thomas knew the choice was real. The storm pressed against the lighthouse like a living beast. Waves hurled themselves at the cliffs, rain lashed sideways, and thunder cracked the sky in jagged white scars. The entire world seemed caught between sea and night, and Thomas stood in the lantern room with the pale woman, his father's face glowing faintly behind the glass. Her voice threaded through the roar of the storm. "The sea waits, Thomas. Will you give it what it is owed?" Thomas's chest burned. "Why me? Why my family?" Her expression shifted, softer now, almost mournful. "Because your great-grandfather promised the sea his line in exchange for safety." Storms were breaking the village, swallowing children, wrecking ships. He begged the sea for mercy, and it granted it through me. Thomas shook his head. "That isn't mercy. That's a curse." Her pale eyes gleamed. "Mercy always carries a price. The sea does not forgive freely." Behind her, Elias pressed his palm harder to the glass. His mouth formed words Thomas couldn't hear. Thomas staggered closer. "Father, tell me what to do." But the storm drowned out all sound. He stumbled down the spiral stairs, heart thundering, the keeper's words and Dunlow's warning warring in his head. Outside, bonfires on the cliffs flickered weakly in the rain. Villagers huddled near them, praying louder as the storm howled. Thomas saw Mrs. Dunlow leaning on her cane, her shawl plastered with rain. She wasn't afraid. She stared at the sea as though daring it to strike. He ran to her. "It's true, isn't it? About the bargain." She turned slowly. "You've seen her." "Yes, she says I must choose. A soul for my father's freedom." Her mouth tightened. "And so the sea whispers its poison again." Thomas grabbed her arm. "Tell me how to break it." Her eyes glinted. "By refusing the bargain. By letting the sea know you will not pay in blood." "But then my father," his voice cracked. Her hand, gnarled and cold, touched his cheek. "The sea feeds on love twisted into sacrifice. Deny it that, and you weaken its hold." Thomas swallowed hard. "Then why didn't anyone else stop it?" Her gaze drifted toward the lighthouse. "Because when it's your child, your wife, your kin, you'd trade the whole world to bring them back." Samuel appeared from the shadows, his lantern swinging wildly. "Don't listen to her, boy. She wants you to suffer as she has. Her son was the first taken. She'd rather see you drown than see the cycle broken." Mrs. Dunlow spat at the ground. "Liar! You've served the sea all your life, keeper. Fed it without question." The old man's face twisted. "Because refusing means the village dies. Storms will rise, ships will sink, children will be swallowed. Better one life than all." Thomas looked between them, rain burning his eyes. "So which truth is it? Save one or save many?" Neither answered. The storm answered for them, crashing against the cliffs like a drumbeat of doom. Midnight bled into the black hours. Thomas climbed back to the lantern chamber, driven by desperation. His father's ghost was clearer now, his eyes wet with tears, his voice finally breaking through. "Son, don't do this." Thomas's throat closed. "But I can free you." Elias shook his head violently. "Not at the cost of another. Don't let her twist you." The pale woman loomed behind him, her smile faint. "He speaks as a father. But fathers are weak. You must decide as a man." Her hand brushed the glass, and suddenly Thomas saw images flashing like lightning. Samuel dragging a drowning sailor into the lantern, Mrs. Dunlow screaming as her child slipped under waves, his mother weeping alone in the cottage after Elias's death, all tied to the same cycle. "Break it," she whispered, "or bind it, but choose before dawn." The clock inside the keeper's quarters struck 2. Thomas stood trembling, the beam of the lighthouse sweeping the storm. He knew he had 3 choices: sacrifice himself and free his father. Offer another soul, condemning them in his place. Refuse and let his father remain trapped forever. He staggered out onto the catwalk, wind threatening to hurl him into the black water below. Samuel burst out behind him. "You can't fight it, boy. Do what must be done." Thomas spun. "Whose side are you on?" "The villages. Always the villages." Rage filled Thomas. "You killed others, didn't you? You fed the lantern." Samuel's face hardened. "And I'll do it again. Better my hands be stained than every family destroyed." He lunged forward, trying to push Thomas toward the glowing chamber. Thomas fought him, fists slamming against bone, the storm swallowing their shouts. For a moment, the boy and the keeper wrestled at the edge of the world, lightning turning them into shadows locked in battle. Finally, with a cry, Thomas shoved Samuel back. The old man stumbled, then slipped. Thomas caught his wrist at the last second, muscles screaming as Samuel dangled above the roaring sea. The pale woman's laughter rose with the waves. "Yes, Thomas. One soul. His for your fathers. Do it." Samuel's eyes burned with fear. "Don't let me go, lad. Don't become like me." Thomas's hands trembled. The choice hung between them, heavier than the storm. And somewhere inside the lantern, Elias's voice cried, "Choose life, Thomas, even if it means losing me." The storm held its breath. Samuel's weight dragged at Thomas's arm, slick with rain and blood. The waves clawed upward, hungry, every crash like the sea demanding its payment. The pale woman hovered in the light of the lantern chamber, her hair floating as if underwater. Her voice coiled through the storm. "One soul, Thomas. That is all. One for your father. Let him go. Let the sea drink its due." Samuel's grip was weak, his fingernails scraping Thomas's skin. "Don't, lad. Don't damn yourself." But Thomas's muscles burned. He couldn't hold the old keeper forever. His thoughts twisted, pulling him between two truths: his father's desperate face behind the lantern glass and Samuel's trembling body in his grasp. "Why should I save you?" Thomas shouted over the roar. "You killed others. You served her." Samuel's lips bled rain and salt. I did, and I'll live with it when I meet the depths. But if you let go now, you're no better." The pale woman leaned closer. Her breath was cold as the tide. "You cannot resist me. Your bloodline is bound. Let the storm be your witness. Give me the keeper and free your father." Thomas's teeth clenched. He felt the pull of both futures, the unbearable relief of seeing Elias freed, and the hollow shame of knowing it came through blood. Then his father's voice rang out, clear as thunder. "Son, don't buy my life with murder. End it another way." Thomas's grip slipped, the old man sliding further. Lightning cracked, throwing the world into stark white. For a heartbeat, time froze, and Thomas made his choice. With a cry, he hauled Samuel upward, dragging him back onto the slick catwalk. Both collapsed, gasping. The pale woman's shriek split the storm. "Fool!" She turned on Thomas, eyes burning like drowned lanterns. The wind howled harder, nearly tearing the tower from its foundations. "You think you can defy me?" she hissed. Her form grew taller, water streaming from her skin until she was a storm given shape. "You will pay in blood, whether yours or theirs." Samuel staggered to his feet, coughing, his hand fumbling for the lantern's door. "Boy, we must snuff it out. Only then will her grip loosen." Thomas stared. "If the lantern dies, the ships will crash." Samuel nodded grimly. "Better wreckage than bondage. Better truth than this endless lie." The pale woman's laughter shook the tower. "You would doom them all? Every sailor that comes to shore will break upon the rocks. You will drown your village in blood." Thomas's heart thundered. The villagers' prayers carried faintly through the storm. His father's face pressed harder to the glass, mouth moving in a frantic plea he couldn't hear. Samuel shoved the boy toward the lantern room. "Choose, lad. Smash it and end her reign, or feed it and bind yourself forever." But don't stand there trembling. Thomas staggered inside. The great lens blazed like a sun, beams cutting the storm. His father's hands beat against the inner glass, his eyes wild with urgency. "Tell me what to do," Thomas cried. For the first time, Elias's voice came through, soft, torn. "Live without me. Break it." Tears blurred Thomas's sight. He pressed his forehead to the glass. "I can't." "You can," Elias whispered. "A father's duty is not to bind his son, but to free him. Do what I could not." The pale woman shrieked again, her voice rattling the tower's bones. "Break the light and you bury him forever. His soul will sink. He will never pass on. You'll condemn him to the black, lost for all eternity." Samuel staggered in, blood at his temple. "Don't listen, lad. She lies. She always lies." Thomas raised the iron wrench lying on the floor. The beam of the lantern stretched over the storm, his reflection a trembling ghost in its glass. His hands shook. He had 3 breaths to decide. 1 breath, his father's eyes, begging for release. 2 breaths, the villagers below, huddled in fear. 3 breaths, the sea's hiss, the pale woman's smile like the curve of a sickle. Then Thomas screamed and swung. The wrench shattered the lantern glass with an explosion of fire and shards. Light scattered, screaming as if alive. The pale woman shrieked, her form breaking apart into spray and mist. The storm roared, then choked, then began to unravel. Elias's figure dissolved in the blaze. His final whisper drifted through Thomas's mind. "I am proud of you." And then he was gone. The storm fell silent. The sea calmed, black and endless but still. Thomas collapsed on the floor, chest heaving, the broken lantern smoldering beside him. Samuel sank against the wall, eyes closed. "You've done it, boy," he rasped. "You've broken her." But Thomas only wept, because freedom had cost him everything. The storm had gone. What remained was silence. A silence so deep Thomas could hear the beat of his own heart against the broken stone. The lighthouse tower stood scarred, its lantern shattered, the once proud beam now nothing more than scattered embers. Below, the villagers began climbing the cliff path. Their lanterns bobbed like fireflies against the night, voices rising in fearful wonder. Samuel leaned against the wall, his breath shallow but steady. His weathered hand rested on Thomas's shoulder. "You've ended it, lad. No more bargains. No more blood debts." Thomas didn't answer. His eyes were fixed on the Black Sea. Every wave looked like a coffin lid. Every ripple whispered like a voice that might have been his father's. The villagers reached the tower. Old women crossed themselves. Men pulled hats low. Children clutched their mothers. They looked at the broken lantern, at Thomas standing pale and hollow-eyed. "Is it done?" one of them whispered. Thomas swallowed hard. "The sea won't take you anymore." His voice broke. "But my father, he's gone." The villagers lowered their heads. Some murmured prayers, others crossed themselves again. The oldest among them, a woman with eyes like storm clouds, stepped forward. "Your father's soul is free, child. You gave him peace. That is more than most men ever receive." Thomas wanted to believe her, but the emptiness inside him said otherwise. Days passed. The sea was calm, unnaturally so, as if still digesting the storm's rage. No shipwrecks came, no drownings. Fishermen ventured out and returned with heavy nets. The village whispered that the curse was broken. But Thomas still woke in the night, drenched in sweat, hearing his father's voice in the surf. Sometimes, when the waves lapped against the rocks, he swore he saw a shadowed figure watching from the foam. Samuel lingered too, though his strength waned. He no longer climbed the tower's stairs with ease, but each evening he sat at the base, pipe in hand, staring out over the horizon. "Strange thing, freedom," he muttered one night, "feels heavier than chains." Thomas said nothing. He knew what the old man meant. On the seventh night, when the moon was a thin blade above the water, Thomas returned to the ruins of the lantern chamber. The glass was gone, but the iron frame remained, twisted and blackened. He set his hand against it, the cold searing his palm. "Father," he whispered, "if you're out there, forgive me." The wind moved through the tower, low and mournful. For a heartbeat, Thomas thought he heard an answer. A sigh, a wordless release. And then it was gone. At dawn, Thomas climbed down and stood before the villagers. "The light is dead," he told them. "We must build a new one, a light not bound to the sea, but to ourselves." The people nodded, some fearful, some hopeful. And slowly, they began to gather wood and iron, tools and stone. The work was hard, but their hands were free of bargains. For the first time in living memory, the village belonged to itself. Samuel smiled faintly as he watched. "You'll be the keeper now, lad," he said. "But not her keeper. Yours." Thomas looked at the sea one last time. The pale woman did not rise. The water lay still, waiting. And though he could not banish the ache in his chest, Thomas straightened his shoulders. The weight was his and he would bear it, because some secrets were meant to be broken, even if they broke the one who carried them. Years later, travelers would pass the coast and see a new light burning atop the cliff. A light not bound by curse or bargain, but by the hands of a boy who had grown into a man. Some nights, sailors swore the beam carried more than fire. They said it carried a whisper, soft as a father's voice. "I am proud of you." And Thomas, standing alone in the tower, would close his eyes, listen, and keep the light alive. This is the end of the story. I hope you enjoy it.